Hey guys, it's Tahira, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the past like 2 months. Basically, my last books I read recently video was I think at the beginning of December, and since then I've read about 8 books which I'm going to be talking about today. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and start talking about all these books. The first book that I'm going to be talking about is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. City of Girls follows our main character, 19-year-old Vivian Morris, who is kicked out of college, and because of this she is sent to live with her aunt in Manhattan. Her aunt owns this rundown theater, and Vivian starts working for her and kind of gets to know all these people that work at the theater as well. The reason I first picked this book up was because it reminded me, based on the description, a lot about The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is kind of the same. Like, it chronicles the life of this woman. Well, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was about a famous actress, but it's the same vibe of like chronicling the life of a young woman in the early 1900s. I really liked seeing the world from Vivian's point of view, and I actually really liked all of the characters. It's not like there were a ton of characters, but there were quite a few characters, and with that it can be like hard to make all the characters likable, and I really did enjoy all of them. The only reason I docked a star was because there was this chunk like kind of at the end where it started going over like broad chunks of her life, which I kind of felt like it was boring. And also I felt very unsatisfied by the ending. I don't know, I just feel like I wanted a little bit more closure than it was. But overall, this was actually a really great story. And I enjoyed reading about Vivian's everyday life in New York City. I don't know, it's just interesting because all the characters and all the people that worked at the theater was interesting, and that's what made the book enjoyable to read. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed this book. The next book that I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, which I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This book has been on my TBR for such a long time, and I finally got around to reading it this December. This book is also kind of my first taste into the thriller, psychological thriller genre, and I don't know, I feel like I definitely need to read more to get more of a taste of the genre. I mean, the reason I picked this as my first kind of entrance into the genre is because this is such a popular novel, and there's a whole movie about it as well that I haven't seen yet, but I do want to. But I just felt that I wasn't truly shocked by any of the twists. I don't know if I was supposed to be shocked. I don't know how these books would go, but I don't know. I just personally didn't feel as surprised as I feel like I should have been. And there were also some points in the middle where the stories kind of started dragging, and I don't know, it just kind of got a little slow at some points. With this book, I also felt unsatisfied by the ending. Again, I just didn't feel that closure. I feel like there was a lot of like open-ended things just left, and I don't know, I just wanted more of an ending, I guess, than there was. In the end, I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it overall. My feelings on this book are a little confusing. I'm not sure what to think. I think because I haven't really read a lot of psychological / mystery thriller books, and maybe I just need to read more. Hopefully the movie will be good, but it's because I still really want to watch that. But I'm hoping in the future I'm gonna try some more thrillers and see how I like them. Also, you'll see that in this stack of books that I've read, there's just so much variety of genre that I read in the past 2 months, and I think that's great. And I think it's also good because usually I'm used to just reading like YA fantasy and nothing but YA fantasy and YA contemporary, but I am starting to branch out a little bit more in my reading, which I think is cool. Anyway, the next book is very different from the last book that I read, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book follows Chloe Brown, who is a chronically ill computer geek, and she has kind of this run-in with a near-death experience, and this experience causes her to reflect on her life, and she decides that her life is kind of boring, so she makes this list of things that she wants to do. And her list has things like enjoy a drunken night out, ride a motorcycle, go camping, have meaningless but thoroughly enjoyable sex, and travel the world with nothing but hand luggage. And she kind of needs someone to do some of these things, so she befriends her building's superintendent, and they kind of form a bond. Overall, this is actually probably my first entrance into the romance genre because I haven't really read adult romance before. Overall, I think this book is super cute, and I feel like I think I mentioned this in another video, but I like that Talia Hibbert's books have plus-size main characters, but it doesn't really focus on that, which I think is really important. Some of the things I didn't like are that sometimes the characters felt a little juvenile, like Red the main love interest and Chloe both felt like they were little kids or like teenagers at times, and their dialogue didn't match up with their age. And sometimes the dialogue and the writing felt a little too sappy and cheesy, and I don't know, it felt like the Red always was like drooling over Chloe like all the time, and I know, like, I don't know, maybe that's just not for me. There was also a conflict that happened at the end of the story that I felt like was very unnecessary. It was very out of the blue, and it was resolved so quickly that it didn't even need to be there. Yeah, those are some of the reasons why I gave this book 3.5 stars and not something higher, but overall I think it's a really cute story. The next book is a historical fiction book, and that is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This book has also been on my TBR for the longest time, like probably one of the longest books that's been sitting on my shelf unread. But again, I finally got around to it this December, and I actually really enjoyed it. I gave this 4.5 stars, and I was a little hesitant going into it just because I don't ever read historical fiction, and I don't know, I just feel like it's not for me as a genre. So, but I've heard just so many good things about it that I had to give it a try. There are actually 2 simultaneous storylines going on with this book, and I actually liked one more than the other. So this book kind of follows 2 sisters, and one sister is like with her child back in France at home, and she's kind of dealing with the effects of the war at home, and then the other girl is a more like outgoing and adventurous and bold, and she kind of is in the war itself. And I actually really liked reading about the sister that is back at home in France, maybe because like I have learned that I don't really like war stories and just books surrounding war. I don't know, I just find it boring, at least for me. But I think reading about the effects of like that war at home and how the people back at home were affected was really interesting to me. But yeah, I feel like I don't really have much to say about this book because it was really amazing. There was a lot of emotional scenes in it, of course, because of the topic. But yeah, the writing was beautiful, and I will hopefully read some more Kristen Hanna in the future. The next book that I read was the second Brown sisters book, and that is Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book follows Danica Brown, who is a professor at a university, and she's looking for the perfect friends with benefits. And then a security guard rescues her from a fire drill gone wrong, and they kind of have to create a fake relationship. So they start this fake relationship, and obviously they develop like actual feelings for each other. This book I actually liked a lot more than Get a Life Chloe Brown, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way. One of the main reasons I didn't like Get a Life Chloe Brown as much was because of the ending conflict in that story. It just didn't make sense. It just was out of the blue and very quickly resolved. But in this book, it felt like this ending conflict just made a lot more sense for the story and the characters. I think the chemistry between Zafir, the main love interest, and Dani is just a lot more apparent in this, and I just love the fake dating trope in general. Like, I just like, cause they're just like together, and then they're like convincing themselves that they don't actually have feelings for each other, and it's all because of this relationship, but then they have to confront themselves and be like, I actually have feelings for this person. It's just very cute. I just love this trope. The only reason I docked 1/2 star because I gave this 4.5 stars is because I actually don't know how I feel about sex scenes in general. It's not that it makes me uncomfortable to read, it's just I feel like it's just not enjoyable for me to read, and I would rather read a lot more like cute fluffy scenes than like sex scenes. I don't know, maybe that's just me. A lot of people prefer the sex scenes, they like the smut. I don't really enjoy it as much, but I don't know, I just like the cute shit. But yeah, this book was a lot better than Get a Life Chloe Brown, and I'm really excited for the third book, After Age Eve Brown, and I'm hoping that it's even better than this one. The next book is actually a non-fiction book, and that's really surprising because I literally never read non-fiction like ever, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I gave this book 4.25 out of 5 stars, and this is Michelle Obama's memoir, and it kind of chronicles her life as well as her time in the White House. This book I found was really insightful as to like what the journey was like for Obama to get the presidency, as well as what it was like during the presidency itself. And there's of course a lot of reflective wisdom in this book because it's like Michelle Obama reflecting on her life. So she's like gained a lot of insight, obviously, which she's sharing with us, which is great. I gave this 4.25 out of 5 stars, and I was looking at Goodreads and so many people were giving it 5 out of 5 stars, and I don't know, like I feel like I just didn't feel the connection enough to give it 5 out of 5 stars. Maybe it's because I don't really read memoirs. I'm not really used to reading them and I don't know how to rate them. And that's why I really don't have much to say about it, because I feel like I don't know how to review a memoir just because I don't read a lot of them. But overall, it was a good book. The next book I gave 4.5 stars, and that is Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. This book follows a 17-year-old Felix Love who is a transgender queer boy, and he is never been in love. He wants to be in love. He feels like everyone else is in love except him. And one day an anonymous student starts sending him threatening messages, and it creates a whole gallery where they display his dead name as well as old pictures of him before he transitioned, and he is trying to get revenge on this person. There's a lot of self-discovery and Felix kind of dealing with his own complicated emotions with his identity. This book is such a beautiful story, and I think it actually took me a little bit to get into and fall into the story and the writing, but once I did, I was blown away. I absolutely loved it, and that's the reason I gave it, like, I took down half a star, because it just took me a little bit to get into it, but once I did, it was amazing. One of the main things I loved about this book is that the characters are not perfect. They are very flawed in some ways, and they're messy teenagers, and I really love that. I feel like a lot of times authors can make teenagers to be too perfect and not really ones that make a ton of mistakes, but in this book you can really see that these are people that are in their teenage years. They are feeling a lot of intense emotions that like teenagers do, and sometimes they're not doing the most correct actions. I also really love the relationship between Ezra and Felix. Ezra is Felix's best friend, and they just have the most beautiful and cute and just supportive friendship ever. Like, they're just there for each other all the time. They're not afraid to like show each other affection as friends. Well, kind of. And I feel like you don't really see friendships like that in YA either. Like, the amount of time they spent together and the amount of just connection and intimacy they had with each other as friends is just unlike anything I've ever seen in a book before. One of the other reasons that I docked half a star is because there was something that happened with one of the characters where like their personality was just didn't match up with the way their personality was like previously in the book. I don't know, does that make sense? But overall, I think this is a very beautiful and emotional story, and I would definitely be rereading it sometime in the future. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about is another nonfiction book. Like, I know, who am I? I never read nonfiction, and that is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. It is basically exactly what it says on the cover, a brief history of humankind, and just kind of chronicles the time from like when humans were being formed, I guess, up until now. It's super brief. It doesn't go super in depth into really anything, but I think that's what I really liked about it. Like, I don't read a lot of nonfiction, so I don't really want to get super in depth into all of these things, but I think getting like a little taste of all these things was really what I liked about it. In the end, I learned a lot from it, and I'm really glad I read it. And I don't know, but it did get boring for me at times just because I'm not used to reading nonfiction, and I'm just used to like fast-paced, like interesting stories, and sometimes this just wasn't interesting for me. But I am hoping to read more nonfiction books in the future, as well as maybe some books from this author as well. Anyway, those are all the 8 books that I read in the past 2 months. I'm really glad that I really liked all these books for the most part, and I read a ton of like different kinds of books, which I hope to keep doing. Let me know down below what's your favorite book that you've read recently, as I would love to know. But that is for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!